The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruins of New Geneva, its light filtering through the skeletal remains of what had once been humanity's greatest space colony. 8-year-old Maya pressed herself against the cold metal wall of a collapsed building, her small hands clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Tears streamed down her dirt-stained cheeks as the thunderous roar of engines filled the air above. The Khazari had returned. Maya had been hiding in this collapsed section of the colony for 3 days now, surviving on emergency rations she'd found scattered in the debris. Her parents were gone, taken in the first wave of the attack along with most of the adult population. The lucky ones had died quickly. The others had been dragged away to the Khazari ships for reasons Maya couldn't understand, but knew were terrible. She squeezed her eyes shut as another wave of alien fighters screamed overhead, their distinctive blue energy trails painting deadly lines across the gray sky. The sound was getting closer. They were doing another sweep, looking for survivors. Looking for her. High above the ruined colony, something else watched the devastation unfold. Zephyr 977 hung motionless in the void, his massive form hidden behind the twisted wreckage of a destroyed space station. To human eyes, he would have appeared as a nightmare made manifest, a creature of scales and spines, with wings that could span a small building and eyes that burned like molten gold. The Khazari had nicknamed his species dragons after discovering ancient human mythology files, finding cruel humor in the comparison. But Zephyr was not Khazari. His people, the Drachmari, had been fighting the Khazari Empire for over 3 centuries. They were an ancient race, one of the few civilizations that had successfully resisted Khazari expansion through sheer force and determination. The Drachmari were warriors by nature, their culture built around honor, strength, and the protection of the innocent. They had no love for the Khazari's brutal methods of conquest. Zephyr watched through his ship's sensors as the Khazari continued their systematic extermination of the human colony below. He had arrived too late to prevent the initial attack, but he had hoped to find survivors. His mission was one of reconnaissance, gathering intelligence on Khazari movements in this sector of space. Officially, he was not supposed to intervene, but the Drachmari had a saying, "The measure of a warrior is not in the enemies he defeats, but in the innocents he saves." As another group of Khazari fighters dove toward the colony's surface, their weapons charging for what appeared to be a final bombardment, Zephyr made his decision. His massive hands moved across the control interface with surprising grace, bringing his ship's weapons online. The Drachmari vessel, sleek and predatory despite its size, began to descend toward the planet's surface. Maya heard the new sound before she saw its source, a deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was different from the sharp whine of Khazari engines, deeper and somehow more alive. She risked a glance upward through a gap in the debris and gasped at what she saw. A shape was descending from the sky, and it was unlike anything in her young experience. Where Khazari ships were angular and harsh, all sharp edges and aggressive lines, this vessel flowed like liquid metal. It moved with an organic grace that reminded Maya of the dolphins she had seen in the colony's aquarium before the attack. The ship's hull was a deep midnight blue, almost black, with patterns of silver that seemed to shift and dance in the sunlight. As it drew closer, Maya could see that what she had taken for decorative patterns were actually functional elements, sensor arrays, weapon ports, and other systems integrated seamlessly into the vessel's living architecture. But what truly took her breath away were the wings. Massive, membranous structures extended from the ship's sides, not for atmospheric flight, but as solar collectors and sensor arrays. They moved with subtle adjustments, catching the light of the system's star and redirecting it through crystalline channels that ran along the hull. The overall effect was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The Khazari fighters had noticed the newcomer as well. Their formation wheeled around to face this new threat, their weapons already charging. Maya counted 12 of them against the single alien vessel, and her heart sank. Even if this new arrival wasn't friendly to the Khazari, It seemed impossible that one ship could stand against so many. She was about to learn just how wrong she could be. Zephyr's ship moved with a fluidity that defied physics as understood by most species. Drakmari technology had evolved along different lines than that of other races, incorporating biological principles into mechanical systems. His ship wasn't just a machine, it was a living entity bred and grown rather than built, its consciousness linked with his own through neural interfaces that had been implanted at birth. The Khazari opened fire first, their blue energy beams lancing through space toward the Drakmari vessel. Zephyr's ship twisted away from the incoming fire with serpentine grace, its hull rippling as adaptive armor adjusted to deflect the energy weapons. Counterfire erupted from weapon ports that opened like flowering buds along the ship's flanks. But these weren't the crude energy weapons favored by the Khazari. Drakmari weaponry was based on focused gravitational fields, capable of crushing matter at the molecular level or redirecting kinetic energy with devastating precision. The first Khazari fighter to be caught in one of these fields simply imploded, its hull crumpling like paper before exploding outward in a shower of debris. The battle was brief and decisive. The Khazari pilots were skilled, but they were facing technology and tactics that their empire had spent centuries trying to understand and counter. Zephyr's ship danced through their formation like a predator among prey, its weapons reaching out to crush or deflect their vessels with casual efficiency. Within minutes, the sky above New Geneva was clear of Khazari fighters. Maya watched in awe as the mysterious ship settled onto a relatively clear area of the colony's central plaza, its landing accomplished with barely a sound. The vessel's hull continued to shimmer and shift for several moments after touchdown, as if the ship itself was breathing. Then, with a soft hiss of escaping atmosphere, a section of the hull opened to reveal an airlock. For a long moment, nothing happened. Maya found herself holding her breath, torn between hope and fear. Then, a figure emerged from the ship, and her world changed forever. The being that stepped onto the ruined surface of New Geneva was clearly not human, but neither was it like the insectoid Khazari that had destroyed her world. This creature moved on two powerful legs, but its overall proportions suggested immense strength held in check. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body covered in scales that shifted colors subtly in the changing light. Two massive arms ended in hands that bore wicked-looking claws, but it carried itself with a controlled grace that spoke of intelligence and restraint. Most striking of all were the wings, not the mechanical constructs of a ship, but living appendages that folded against the creature's back like a great cloak. They were the deep blue-black of a night sky, traced with patterns of silver that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. And the eyes, large, golden, and undeniably intelligent, swept across the ruins with what Maya could only interpret as sadness. Zephyr surveyed the devastation with growing anger. He had seen Khazari work before, but it never failed to disgust him. The aliens seemed to take particular pleasure in destroying anything beautiful or peaceful, as if the very existence of such things was an affront to their militaristic culture. This human colony had clearly been a place of learning and growth, with botanical gardens and artistic installations scattered among the residential and commercial areas. Now was nothing but rubble and twisted metal. His enhanced senses picked up life signs scattered throughout the ruins. Not many, but more than he had hoped. Most were faint, suggesting injured survivors hiding in whatever shelter they could find. But one signal was stronger, closer. A child, his instruments suggested, hiding in the debris of what had once been a residential complex. Zephyr began moving toward the source of the life sign, his powerful legs carrying him across the broken ground with careful steps. Despite his size and strength, he moved quietly, not wanting to frighten any survivors more than necessary. The Drakmari had encountered humans before, during previous conflicts with the Khazari, and he knew that his species' appearance could be intimidating to most other races. As he approached the collapsed building where Maya was hiding, Zephyr caught sight of movement in the shadows. A small figure pressed back against the debris, trying to make itself invisible. The child was injured. His sensors detected elevated stress hormones and the chemical signatures of pain and fear. But she was alive, and for the moment, that was what mattered. Zephyr stopped a respectful distance away and slowly lowered himself to one knee, bringing his head closer to the child's level. Even crouched down, he was still significantly larger than the small human, but the gesture was one his people used when dealing with younglings of any species. It was a posture that suggested protection rather than threat. Maya stared up at the massive alien with wide, frightened eyes. Every instinct told her to run, but there was nowhere to go, and something in the creature's posture suggested that running would be pointless anyway. It could have caught her easily if it had wanted to. Instead, it simply waited, those golden eyes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Minutes passed in silence. The alien didn't move, didn't speak, didn't make any threatening gestures. It simply watched her with what Maya gradually began to recognize as patience. Not the cold patience of a predator waiting to strike, but something gentler, something almost caring. The tears that had stopped when the creature first appeared began to flow again, but for different reasons now. Maya had been alone for 3 days, terrified and grieving, convinced that she would die in this rubble, just like everyone else she had ever known. The appearance of this alien should have terrified her further, but instead she found herself feeling something she had thought was gone forever. Hope. As her tears began to fall in earnest, the small sounds of her sobbing echoing off the broken walls around them, the alien did something that changed everything. It spoke. The voice was deep and resonant, like distant thunder, but the words it spoke were in perfect, unaccented English. Do not weep, little one. You are safe now. Maya's tears stopped as if a switch had been thrown. She stared at the massive alien creature, her mouth hanging open in shock. It had spoken to her in her own language, with words that were gentle and reassuring rather than threatening. But how was that possible? You can talk? She whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind that whistled through the broken buildings around them. Zephyr tilted his great head slightly, a gesture that would have seemed familiar to anyone who had ever seen a curious dog. My people have studied many languages, young one. We have encountered your species before, though not often under such tragic circumstances. His voice carried a weight of sorrow that Maya could hear even through her fear. What is your name? Maya, she said, then immediately wondered if she should have given her name to an alien. But there was something in his tone, in the way he had lowered himself to her level, that made her feel less afraid. Are you going to hurt me? Never, Zephyr replied without hesitation. I am Zephyr of the Drachmarie, and my people are sworn enemies of those who did this to your home. I came too late to save your colony, but I will not leave you here to face the darkness alone. Maya studied his face, tried to read the alien features. His eyes were the most expressive part of him, and right now they seemed filled with genuine concern. She had always been good at reading people. Her mother had often said she had an intuitive understanding of when someone was lying or telling the truth. Everything about this creature suggested honesty and a desire to help. Everyone's gone, she said, fresh tears threatening to spill. My mommy and daddy, my teacher, all my friends. The Bud people took them away 3 days ago. I've been hiding here ever since. Zephyr felt a familiar rage building in his chest at the casual cruelty of the Khazari. To attack a peaceful colony was bad enough, but to separate families, to take parents from their children, was an act of pure evil. The Khazari seemed to delight in causing maximum psychological trauma to their victims, and children like Maya suffered the worst of it. The Khazari are creatures without honor, he said, his voice carefully controlled to keep his anger from frightening the child. But you are not alone anymore. I give you my word as a warrior of the Drachmarie that I will protect you. Maya looked at him for a long moment, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind since he first appeared. Are you a dragon? The question caught Zephyr off guard. He was familiar with human mythology from his people's cultural studies, but he hadn't expected a child to make that connection so quickly. I suppose there are similarities, he admitted. My people do have scales and wings, and we are larger than most species. But we do not breathe fire or hoard treasure, as your legend suggests. But you're strong like a dragon, right? Maya asked, a spark of hope appearing in her eyes. Strong enough to fight the bug people? Yes, little one. We are strong enough to fight them. Zephyr extended one massive hand toward her, palm up, claws retracted. Will you come with me? My ship has medical facilities, food, and warm sleeping quarters. You need not fear the Khazari while you are under my protection. Maya stared at the offered hand. It was easily larger than her entire torso, with scales that shifted from deep blue to silver in the changing light. The claws, even retracted, were as long as her fingers and looked like they could cut through steel. But there was something gentle in the way he held his hand, careful and patient, waiting for her decision rather than simply taking her. She thought about her parents, about how they had always taught her to be brave and to trust her instincts about people. Right now, her instincts were telling her that this alien dragon was probably the safest thing in her entire world. Slowly, carefully, Maya reached out and placed her small hand in his massive palm. Zephyr's ship was unlike anything Maya could have imagined. The interior was clearly alien in design, with flowing organic curves instead of the sharp angles she was used to in human construction. But it was also somehow comforting, with warm lighting that seemed to come from the walls themselves and a subtle, thrumming vibration that felt like a gentle heartbeat. This is the medical bay, Zephyr explained as he led her through corridors that seemed to pulse with life. My ship's biosystems will need to scan you to ensure you are not seriously injured and to determine what medical care you might require. The medical bay was a circular room dominated by what looked like a large, flower-shaped platform in the center. As they approached, petals of silvery metal unfolded from the platform, revealing a comfortable-looking surface padded with some kind of soft, organic material. It will not hurt, Zephyr assured her, as she hesitated at the edge of the platform. The ship's consciousness is very gentle with younglings. She knows that you are under my protection. The ship is alive? Maya asked, looking around with new wonder. All Drakmari ships are living beings, Zephyr explained. They're grown rather than built, bred from genetic templates that have been refined over thousands of years. This ship's name is Star Whisper, and she has been my companion for over 50 of her years. Maya climbed onto the platform, which immediately adjusted to her small size and began to emit a soft, warm glow. She felt a tingling sensation pass through her body, not unpleasant, but definitely alien. After a few minutes, the glow faded, and the platform returned to normal. You have some minor injuries, cuts, bruises, dehydration, and malnutrition, Zephyr reported after consulting a display that had materialized in the air beside him. Nothing that cannot be easily treated. Star Whisper will prepare appropriate medications and nutrition supplements. As if responding to his words, a section of the wall opened to reveal what looked like a food preparation area. Various substances began to materialize in containers that formed themselves from the ship's living walls. Maya watched in fascination as what appeared to be a complete meal assembled itself before her eyes. Is it safe for humans to eat? She asked, her stomach growling at the sight and smell of the food. Star Whisper has extensive databases on human nutritional requirements, Zephyr assured her. She has prepared foods that should taste familiar to you, while providing optimal nutrition for your recovery. Maya tentatively tried a bite of what looked like bread, but tasted like the cinnamon rolls her mother used to make for special occasions. It was delicious, and she suddenly realized how hungry she had been. She began to eat with the desperate intensity of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. While Maya ate, Zephyr studied the readings from her medical scan. The physical injuries were minor, as he had reported, but the psychological trauma was severe. The child was in a state of profound grief and shock, her stress indicators off the charts. She would need more than medical treatment to heal from what she had experienced. Maya, he said gently, waiting until she looked up from her meal. I need to ask you about what happened to your colony. I know it is painful, but any information you can provide might help other human settlements prepare for Khazari attacks. Maya's face clouded over, but she nodded slowly. They came in the morning when everyone was just starting their day. There were so many ships, and they made this terrible screaming sound when they flew overhead. The grown-ups tried to fight back, but their weapons didn't work very well against the bug people's shields. Did you see what happened to the people who were taken? Zephyr asked carefully. They put them in cages on their big ships, Maya said, her voice growing smaller. The bug people didn't take all of them, though. They seemed to pick certain ones, like they were looking for something specific. They took all the scientists and engineers first, then some of the artists and teachers. This was valuable intelligence. The Khazari selection process suggested they were not simply conducting a random raid for slaves. They were looking for specific skill sets, which meant they had a particular purpose for their human captives. Did you notice anything else unusual about their behavior? Zephyr prompted gently. Maya thought for a moment, then nodded. They were really careful with the children. Not nice, but they didn't hurt the little kids the way they hurt the grown-ups. And they kept asking questions about something called the Neural Interface Project. I heard my dad mention it sometimes. He said it was some kind of secret research the colony was working on. Zephyr felt a chill run through his scaled hide. Neural interface technology was one of the most dangerous areas of research in the galaxy, capable of allowing direct mental control over machines and other beings. If humans had been developing such technology, and if the Khazari had learned about it, then this attack was far more significant than a simple raid. The Khazari Empire had been searching for effective neural interface technology for centuries. Their own crude attempts at mental control relied on painful surgical implants and chemical conditioning. But true neural interface technology, the kind that could allow seamless integration between mind and machine, had always been beyond their reach. If humans had made a breakthrough in this field, the Khazari would stop at nothing to obtain it, and they would use any means necessary to force the captured scientists to share their knowledge. Maya, Zephyr said urgently, do you know where your colony's research data was stored? Were there backup systems or hidden archives that the Khazari might not have found? Maya nodded slowly. My dad always said the really important stuff was kept in the underground vaults beneath the university. He said they were built to survive anything short of a direct hit from a starship's main guns. Zephyr made a quick decision. If there was research data still intact in those vaults, it was crucial that it not fall into Khazari hands. He would need to retrieve it and get it to the Drakmari military command, where it could be properly secured or destroyed if necessary. But first, he had to ensure Maya's safety. Taking her with him into potentially dangerous underground facilities was not an option, but leaving her alone on the ship was equally unacceptable. She was just a child, traumatized and grieving, and she needed constant care and protection. Maya, I need to go investigate those underground vaults, Zephyr explained. But I will not leave you alone. Star Whisper will take care of you while I am gone, and her defenses are more than capable of protecting you from any remaining Khazari forces. You're leaving me? Maya asked, sudden panic flaring in her eyes. Only for a short time, Zephyr assured her quickly. And you will not truly be alone. Star Whisper's consciousness is quite capable of conversation and companionship. She has helped care for Drakmari younglings for decades. As if to demonstrate, the ship's walls around them began to glow with soft, shifting patterns of color, and a new voice filled the air. This one was different from Zephyr's deep rumble, lighter, more musical, unmistakably feminine. Hello, little Maya, Star Whisper said in perfect English, her tone warm and motherly. I am very pleased to meet you. Zephyr speaks truly. I have cared for many young ones over the years, and I would be honored to watch over you while he completes his mission. Maya looked around in wonder. Talking to Zephyr had been surprising enough, but having a conversation with a spaceship was almost beyond comprehension. You're really alive? She asked. As alive as you were Zephyr, Star Whisper confirmed. Perhaps not in exactly the same way, but I think, I feel, I dream, and I care about those under my protection. You are safe here, young one. I promise you that. Zephyr watched Maya's reaction carefully. The child seemed to be adapting to these new concepts with the remarkable flexibility that younglings of most species possessed. She was afraid, certainly, but she was also curious and willing to trust. That was a good sign for psychological recovery. I will leave my communication device with you, Zephyr told Maya, showing her a small, crystalline device that pulsed with soft blue light. If you need me for any reason, simply speak to it, and I will hear you. I will return as quickly as possible. Promise? Maya asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. I promise, Zephyr said solemnly. You have my word as a warrior of the Drachmary. I will return for you. As Zephyr prepared to leave the ship, Star Whisper's walls shimmered and reconfigured themselves around Maya, creating a smaller, more intimate space that felt less overwhelming. Soft cushions materialized from the organic walls, and entertainment displays began showing images from human culture, animated stories that Star Whisper had downloaded from the colony's databases before they were completely destroyed. Would you like to see a story while we wait for Zephyr to return? Star Whisper asked gently. Maya nodded, settling into the comfortable nest that the ship had created for her. Despite everything that had happened, despite her fear and grief, she found herself feeling something she hadn't expected: hope. For the first time since the attack, she wasn't alone. She had protectors now, alien though they might be, who seemed genuinely committed to keeping her safe. As Zephyr stepped out of his ship and began making his way toward the ruined university, Maya watched him through the ship's transparent walls. The massive dragon-like figure moved through the devastated landscape with purpose and determination, his golden eyes scanning constantly for threats. He'll come back, won't he? Maya asked Star Whisper. He will, the ship replied with absolute certainty. Zephyr has never broken a promise to a youngling. In all the years I have known him, he has always kept his word when it comes to protecting the innocent. Maya settled back in her nest of cushions and allowed herself to believe it. After 3 days of terror and despair, she finally had someone to trust, someone who would fight for her, someone who would make sure she wasn't alone. The underground vaults beneath New Geneva University had been built to withstand almost any disaster imaginable. Zephyr found the entrance hidden beneath a massive pile of debris from the collapsed administration building. His enhanced strength made clearing the rubble a relatively simple task, though he worked carefully to avoid causing any structural instability that might threaten Maya back at the ship. The vault entrance was sealed with both physical barriers and electronic locks, but Drachmary technology was well suited to dealing with such obstacles. Zephyr's personal tools included devices that could interface with most known computer systems, and human encryption was relatively straightforward compared to Khazari military protocols. As the massive doors slid open with a grinding sound that echoed through the underground complex, Zephyr activated his suit's bioluminescent panels to provide illumination. The vaults extended far deeper underground than he had expected, with multiple levels connected by sturdy corridors lined with storage units and computer terminals. Emergency power was still functioning in some sections, casting an eerie red glow over banks of data storage units that hummed with activity. Zephyr approached the nearest terminal and began interfacing with the human computer systems, searching for any information related to neural interface research. What he found exceeded his worst fears. The humans of New Geneva hadn't just been experimenting with neural interface technology. They had successfully created a working prototype. The research files contained detailed specifications for a device that could create a direct link between human consciousness and computer systems, allowing for unprecedented levels of control and data processing. But that wasn't the most disturbing discovery. According to the research logs, the neural interface technology wasn't designed for human use alone. The scientists had been specifically working on ways to make the interfaces compatible with other species, including the insectoid physiology of the Khazari. The implications were staggering. If the Khazari gained access to this technology, they could potentially control the minds of other species directly. No more crude surgical implants or chemical conditioning. They could simply override the consciousness of their victims and turn them into willing slaves. Zephyr quickly began downloading the research data to secure storage devices, intending to take everything back to Drakmari Command for analysis. But as he worked, his enhanced hearing picked up sounds from the levels above. Footsteps, multiple sets of them, moving with the distinctive clicking gait of Khazari soldiers. They had returned to search for exactly what he was now trying to protect. Zephyr estimated at least a dozen Khazari, based on the sound patterns, possibly more. They were methodically searching the ruins above, and it would only be a matter of time before they found the vault entrance. He could try to fight his way out, but that would likely result in significant damage to the research facility and might not guarantee that all the data could be properly destroyed. There was another option, one that would ensure the Khazari never gained access to the neural interface technology. The vault's emergency protocols included a complete data wipe system, designed to prevent sensitive information from falling into enemy hands. Activating it would destroy everything in the facility, including any research that might be beneficial to other species. But before he could make that decision, his communication device chimed with an incoming message from Maya. "Zephyr," came the child's frightened voice. "There are more ships coming. Star Whisper says they're the same kind that attacked before." Zephyr cursed in his native language, a sound like grinding stone and rushing wind. The Khazari had sent reinforcements, probably to conduct a more thorough search of the colony ruins. Maya was safe for now. Star Whisper's defenses were more than adequate to deal with a few Khazari scouts, but if they brought heavy weapons to bear, even his ship might be vulnerable. "Stay calm, little one," he replied through the communicator. "Star Whisper will protect you. I am finishing my mission here, and will return to you shortly. They're landing near your ship." Maya's voice was getting higher with fear. "Star Whisper says there are 20 of them, and they have big guns." 20 Khazari soldiers was a significant force, more than enough to pose a serious threat even to a Drakmari vessel. Zephyr made his decision. He activated the data download at maximum speed, pulling critical files to his portable storage devices while simultaneously beginning the process to destroy everything else. The sounds from above were getting closer. The Khazari had found the vault entrance and were working to breach the security doors. Zephyr could hear the distinctive whine of their cutting tools as they attempted to force their way in. His data extraction completed just as the first security door gave way. Zephyr quickly sealed his storage devices and began moving toward the vault's emergency exit, a narrow tunnel that led to a concealed opening nearly a kilometer away. But as he reached the tunnel entrance, the main vault doors exploded inward in a shower of sparks and molten metal. The first Khazari soldier through the breach was typical of its species, roughly humanoid, but covered in chitinous armor that gleamed with a sickly green sheen. Its multifaceted eyes swept the vault interior, while its mandibles clicked in what Zephyr recognized as excited communication. The creature was armed with a plasma rifle and wore the red markings of a Khazari officer. Behind the first soldier came others, spreading out through the vault with military precision. They began immediately moving toward the research terminals, clearly knowing exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't a random search. They had specific intelligence about the neural interface project. Zephyr had two choices: attempt to escape through the emergency tunnel and hope that his data wipe protocols would destroy the research before the Khazari could access it, or engage them directly and ensure the information was protected. The first option was tactically sound, but risky. Khazari computer specialists were skilled, and they might be able to interrupt the data wipe process. The second option meant revealing his presence and likely fighting his way through a squad of well-armed soldiers in a confined space. But it would guarantee that the neural interface technology never fell into Khazari hands. Maya's frightened voice came through his communicator again. "Zephyr, they're trying to get into the ship. Star Whisper is holding them back, but she says they have something called breach pods, and they're going to try to force their way in. That decided it. If Maya was in immediate danger, he couldn't afford to spend time sneaking through escape tunnels. He needed to end this quickly and return to protect her. Zephyr stepped out of the shadows, his full height and wingspan making him an imposing figure in the confined space of the vault. The Khazari soldiers spun toward him with trained reflexes, their weapons coming up in smooth motions. But they were a fraction of a second too slow. Drachmary combat techniques had been perfected over centuries of warfare. Zephyr's first movement was a wing sweep that knocked 3 soldiers off their feet, while simultaneously deflecting their initial shots. His second was a leap that carried him into the center of their formation, claws and tail lashing out to disable weapons and armor. The Khazari officer managed to get a shot off, its plasma beam searing across Zephyr's left shoulder. The Drachmary's bioarmor absorbed most of the impact, but the wound was still painful. Zephyr's response was swift and decisive. His tail whipped around to knock the officer's weapon aside, while his right hand closed around the creature's throat. "You will not have this technology," Zephyr growled in the Khazari's own language, his words carrying the full weight of Drachmary authority. The officer's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Zephyr recognized as an attempt to call for reinforcements. But the thick walls of the underground vault would block most communications, and his soldiers were already engaged in trying to deal with an enemy that moved like liquid lightning in confined spaces. Zephyr finished the fight in under 2 minutes, leaving the Khazari soldiers unconscious but alive. His people's honor code prohibited killing enemies who were no longer capable of fighting. He quickly checked his data wipe protocols and confirmed that all research files were being systematically destroyed. In another few minutes, nothing would remain of the neural interface project except the data he carried in his secure storage devices. But as he prepared to leave through the emergency tunnel, more sounds echoed from above. Additional Khazari forces were arriving, and from the sound of their equipment, they included heavy weapons teams. Worse, his communicator was picking up transmissions indicating that they had successfully breached Star Whisper's outer defenses. Maya was running out of time. Zephyr abandoned any thought of stealth and blasted directly upward through the vault's ceiling, using his ship's emergency teleportation beacon to punch through several levels of debris and earth. He emerged into the ruined colony's central plaza to find a scene of intense battle. Star Whisper hung in the air above her landing pad, her biomechanical systems fully deployed for combat. Her hull blazed with defensive energy fields, while weapon ports along her flanks spat gravitational pulses at the Khazari forces surrounding her. But even as Zephyr watched, one of the enemy's heavy plasma cannons scored a direct hit on her port wing, causing her to shudder and lose altitude. Around the ship's perimeter, Khazari soldiers were setting up breach pods, specialized devices designed to burn through even heavily armored hulls. Once they activated those weapons, not even Star Whisper's advanced defenses would be able to keep them out. Maya's terrified voice came through his communicator one more time. "Zephyr, they're almost through. Star Whisper is hurt, and she says she can't hold them much longer." Zephyr spread his wings wide and launched himself into the air, his powerful flight muscles carrying him toward his ship at maximum speed. Behind him, the underground research facility erupted in a controlled explosion as the data wipe protocols reached their final stage. Whatever neural interface technology the humans had developed was now gone forever, existing only in the encrypted files he carried. But that victory would mean nothing if he couldn't save Maya. As he approached the battle, Zephyr could see through Star Whisper's transparent sections to the small figure huddled inside. Maya was pressed against one of the ship's internal walls, clutching her stuffed rabbit and staring up at the ceiling where the Khazari breach pods were beginning to burn through the hull. Star Whisper's bioluminescent patterns were pulsing rapidly in configurations that Zephyr recognized as extreme stress and pain. The ship was dying, and she was using her last reserves of strength to protect the child inside. Zephyr's landing among the Khazari forces was like a meteor strike. His full combat form was a terrifying sight, scales shifting to aggressive patterns of red and gold, wings spread wide to cast shadows over the enemy soldiers, claws extended and eyes blazing with fury. This was not the controlled, honorable combat he had displayed in the underground vault. This was a Drakmari warrior protecting a youngling, and there were few forces in the galaxy more dangerous. The first group of soldiers never knew what hit them. Zephyr's initial charge scattered them like leaves, his claws and tail finding targets with lethal precision. Those who survived the first seconds of his assault found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move, dodging plasma beams while delivering devastating counterattacks. But the Khazari had numbers on their side, and their heavy weapons were beginning to focus on this new threat. Zephyr felt another plasma beam sear across his back, followed by the sharp crack of a sonic disruptor that sent waves of pain through his enhanced nervous system. He couldn't win this fight, not against these odds. But he didn't need to win. He just needed to buy enough time for Star Whisper to recover and escape with Maya. Star Whisper, he called out in Drakmari, knowing the ship would understand. Emergency departure. Protect the youngling. I cannot leave you, came her anguished reply, transmitted directly to his neural implants. You must. The child is more important than either of us. Go. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, nothing happened. Then, Star Whisper's engines began to cycle up to full power, her biomechanical systems redirecting energy from weapons to propulsion. She was preparing to leave, even though it meant abandoning her bonded partner. But as the ship began to lift off, Maya's small figure appeared at one of the transparent sections. She was pressing her hands against the hull, her face streaked with tears as she stared down at Zephyr, fighting desperately against impossible odds. And in that moment, something remarkable happened. Maya began to speak, her young voice somehow carrying across the noise of battle. She wasn't speaking to Zephyr or to Star Whisper. She was speaking to the Khazari soldiers themselves. "Stop!" she cried, her words clear and strong despite her tears. "Stop hurting him. He saved me. He's good. Can't you see that he's good?" The effect of Maya's words on the battlefield was immediate and unexpected. Every Khazari soldier stopped firing, their weapons lowering as they stared up at the small human child pressed against the transparent hull of the alien ship. For creatures that had spent their entire lives in a culture built around conquest and domination, the sight of a youngling pleading for the life of an enemy was completely outside their experience. The Khazari officer who had been coordinating the attack, a different one from the underground vault, clicked his mandibles in what Zephyr recognized as confusion. The creature's multifaceted eyes focused on Maya with an intensity that suggested genuine bewilderment. "The human spawn speaks for the Drakmari warrior?" the officer asked in accented but understandable English. "This makes no sense. The dragon creature is your enemy. We seek only to recover stolen property." Maya pressed herself harder against the ship's hull, her small hand splayed against the transparent material, as if she could somehow reach through it to protect Zephyr. "He's not my enemy. He saved me when everyone else was gone. He gave me food and a safe place to sleep, and he promised to protect me." The officer's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of agitation that Zephyr recognized from years of fighting Khazari forces. "You are mistaken, young one. The Drakmari are violent creatures who serve no purpose but war. They cannot be trusted." "You're wrong," Maya shouted back, her voice cracking with emotion. "Zephyr is kind and gentle, and he keeps his promises. He's more trustworthy than you are. You're the ones who destroyed my home and took my parents away." A murmur ran through the Khazari ranks. Many of them had never heard a human child speak before, and the raw emotion in Maya's voice was having an unexpected effect. The Khazari were not entirely without capacity for empathy, but their culture had conditioned them to suppress such feelings in favor of military efficiency. Hearing a youngling's desperate plea was awakening instincts that had been buried under layers of conditioning. Zephyr used the momentary pause and hostilities to assess his situation. He was wounded in several places, his bioarmor was compromised, and he was still vastly outnumbered. But something had changed in the atmosphere of the battle. The Khazari were no longer moving with their previous coordination and aggression. Maya's intervention had introduced an element of doubt into their actions. "The child speaks truth about one thing," Zephyr said, addressing the Khazari officer directly in their own language. "I did promise to protect her, and I will honor that promise with my life if necessary. But she is innocent of whatever crimes you believe have been committed here. Let her go free, and I will surrender myself to you." The officer's head tilted at an angle that suggested deep thought. "You would sacrifice yourself for a creature not of your own species, when you have known for mere hours?" Without hesitation, Zephyr replied, "The protection of younglings is the highest duty of any honorable warrior, regardless of their species of origin." From her position on the ship, Maya could hear the exchange even though she couldn't understand the Khazari language. But she could see Zephyr's posture, the way he had straightened to his full height despite his wounds, and she understood instinctively that he was offering to trade his life for hers. "No," she screamed, pounding her small fists against the hull. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. That's not fair." Star Whisper's voice filled the air around them, transmitted through external speakers so that all present could hear her words. The ship's tone was pained, but resolute. "The youngling speaks wisdom. There has been enough sacrifice, enough death. I propose an alternative." The Khazari officer's attention shifted to the ship itself. Like most members of his species, he had never encountered a truly sentient vessel before. The concept of a machine with consciousness was disturbing to Khazari philosophy. "The warship speaks?" he asked, his mandibles betraying his unease. "I am Star Whisper, consciousness partner to Zephyr 977 of the Drakmari," the ship replied with formal dignity. "I have observed your actions here and the actions of your people against this human colony. I have also observed the courage and compassion of the youngling Maya and the honor displayed by my partner in protecting her. I propose a solution that serves the interests of all present." Zephyr looked up at his ship with concern. He knew Star Whisper well enough to recognize when she was planning something that might put her in danger. "Star Whisper, what are you considering?" "The Khazari seek information about human neural interface technology," the ship continued, ignoring Zephyr's question. "They believe such technology will give them advantages in their conquest campaigns. But they do not understand the true nature of what they seek." The officer stepped forward, his weapon still lowered, but ready to be raised at an instant's notice. "You know of this technology? You have access to the research data." "I have observed its development," Star Whisper said carefully, "and I understand why it would be valuable to your people. But I also understand why it would ultimately be useless to you." This caught the attention of every Khazari present. Their entire mission had been built around acquiring the neural interface technology, and the suggestion that it might be worthless to them was unexpected. "Explain," the officer demanded. "The human neural interface system requires a specific type of consciousness to function properly," Star Whisper began. "It was designed to work with minds that are capable of genuine empathy, creativity, and moral reasoning. These are not weaknesses, as your people believe. They are fundamental requirements for the technology to operate." From inside the ship, Maya listened to Star Whisper's explanation with growing amazement. The ship was describing human qualities that the Khazari clearly didn't possess, but doing it in a way that made those differences seem like advantages rather than weaknesses. "The Khazari mind is powerful and disciplined," Star Whisper continued, "but it has been shaped by your culture to suppress the very qualities that make neural interface technology possible. Even if you possess the complete research data, you would be unable to use it effectively." The officer's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or irritation. "You suggest that our mental discipline is a weakness? This is clearly a deception meant to discourage us from pursuing valuable technology." "Then test it," Star Whisper challenged. "I will provide you with a complete working neural interface unit, along with all necessary documentation. Attempt to use it on any member of your species. When you discover that it is incompatible with Khazari psychology, you will understand that I speak truth." Zephyr felt a chill of fear run through him. "Star Whisper, you cannot." "Peace, my partner," the ship interrupted gently. "I know what I am doing. The technology one offer them is real and functional, but it will indeed be useless to them for exactly the reasons I have stated. Meanwhile, the truly dangerous research remains safely destroyed in the underground vaults." The Khazari officer was clearly intrigued by this proposition. If the ship was telling the truth, then his mission could be considered a success without the need for further violence. If it was lying, he would discover the deception quickly enough and could resume his original plans. "What do you ask in return for this technology?" he demanded. "Safe passage for myself, my partner, and the youngling Maya," Star Whisper replied. "We depart immediately and do not return to this system. You have your technology to study, and we have our freedom." Maya pressed herself against the hull again, her voice desperate. "But what about all the other people? What about my parents and everyone else who was taken away?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Khazari officer looked up at the small human face pressed against the transparent hull, and for a moment his expression seemed almost conflicted. "The captured humans are valuable research subjects," he said finally. "They cannot be returned." "Then we have no deal," Zephyr said immediately. "I will not abandon other innocents to preserve our own lives." But Maya had heard something in the officer's tone, a hesitation that suggested the situation might not be as hopeless as it appeared. With the intuitive understanding that children often possess, she realized that the Khazari officer was not entirely comfortable with his orders. "You don't like hurting people who can't fight back, do you?" she asked, addressing the officer directly. "I can see it in your eyes. You're a soldier, not a monster. There's a difference." The officer's mandibles went completely still, a reaction that Zephyr had never seen in a Khazari before. For several long seconds, the creature simply stared up at Maya with an expression that seemed almost human in its complexity. "The youngling sees much," he said finally, his voice quieter than before. "Perhaps too much. My mommy always said I was good at understanding people," Maya replied, her tears flowing freely now. "She said it was a gift, and that I should use it to help others. Please, I can see that you're not really a bad person. Can't you help the people who were taken? Can't you find a way to let them go?" The Khazari officer looked around at his soldiers, many of whom were watching the exchange with obvious fascination. He seemed to be weighing options that went far beyond the simple parameters of his original mission. "There are complications," he said carefully. "The captured humans have already been processed for transport to our research facilities. Releasing them would require authorization from command levels far above my rank. But you could try, couldn't you?" Maya pressed. "If the technology turns out to be useless to you anyway, then you don't really need the people anymore, right?" Zephyr watched this exchange with growing amazement. Maya was doing something that no Drachmary diplomat had ever managed. She was making a Khazari question his orders based on moral rather than practical considerations. The child's combination of innocence and intuitive understanding was having an effect that all the military might of the Drachmary Empire had failed to achieve. "Perhaps," the officer said finally, "an arrangement could be reached. If the technology proves to be as described, and if my superiors agree that the research subjects are no longer necessary, then some form of exchange might be possible." It wasn't a guarantee, but it was more hope than any of them had possessed moments before. Maya's face lit up with the first genuine smile Zephyr had seen from her since their first meeting. "You'll really try?" she asked. "I will make the request," the officer confirmed. "Whether it is granted depends on factors beyond my control. But I give you my word that the request will be made." Star Whisper's hull began to glow with soft patterns of relief and gratitude. "Then we have an accord. I will prepare the neural interface technology for transfer to your vessel. In return, you will allow us to depart peacefully and will make your best effort to secure the release of the captured humans." As the Khazari soldiers began to withdraw to a respectful distance, Zephyr approached his ship's airlock. He was still wounded and exhausted from the battle, but he felt something he hadn't expected to feel after today's events: hope. Maya met him at the airlock as soon as it opened, launching herself into his arms despite his intimidating size and appearance. For a moment, Zephyr simply held the small, human child, marveling at her courage and compassion. "You did something remarkable out there," he told her softly. "You accomplished with words what all our weapons could not." "I just told the truth," Maya replied, her voice muffled against his scaled chest. "And I think maybe sometimes that's more powerful than being scary." As Star Whisper began preparing for departure, her biomechanical systems humming with renewed energy, Zephyr reflected on what he had witnessed. Maya had shown him something about humanity that all of his people's intelligence reports had missed. Humans possessed a capacity for empathy and moral courage that could reach even their enemies under the right circumstances. It was a lesson worth remembering. 6 months after the events at New Geneva, Maya stood on the observation deck of the Drakmari vessel Eternal Vigilance, watching as another ship approached through the vast emptiness of space. This wasn't Star Whisper. She and Zephyr were on a diplomatic mission to the outer colonies, but Captain Thornscale had become almost as protective of Maya as her original rescuer. The approaching ship bore the distinctive markings of a Kazuri diplomatic vessel, and Maya felt her heart race with nervous anticipation. Today might finally bring the answers she had been hoping for since that terrible day when her world had been destroyed. "Are you ready for this, little star?" Captain Thornscale asked gently, using the nickname that had become common among the Drakmari crew. Maya had earned it during her first week aboard their ships, when she had successfully mediated a dispute between two veteran warriors using nothing but logic and compassion. "I think so," Maya replied, though her hands were shaking slightly as she gripped the observation rail. "It's just, what if they couldn't save anyone? What if my parents are really gone forever?" Thornscale's massive hand settled gently on her shoulder, careful not to let his claws make contact with her delicate human skin. "Then we will face that truth together, and we will honor their memory by ensuring that their sacrifice meant something. But do not abandon hope yet, young one. Stranger things have happened in this galaxy than Kazari developing consciences." The diplomatic meeting was held in a neutral space station at the edge of the frontier territories, under the observation of representatives from several major galactic powers. Maya wasn't allowed in the main conference room. She was still just a child, after all, but she watched through secured video feeds as Zephyr and the Kazari officer she remembered from New Geneva faced each other across a negotiating table. Officer Vexkoth had been promoted since their last meeting, his armor now bearing the golden markings of a Kazari diplomat. But Maya could see in his posture and expression that he was still the same individual who had been moved by her pleas for compassion. The neural interface technology proved to be exactly as your ship consciousness described, Vexkoth reported to the assembled delegates. "Our research teams spent months attempting to adapt it for Kazari use, but the fundamental incompatibilities are insurmountable. The human mind processes information in ways that our species cannot replicate or duplicate." One of the neutral mediators, a tall insectoid being from the Zenith Confederation, leaned forward with interest. "Are you saying that human consciousness possesses unique qualities that make certain technologies exclusively accessible to them?" "That appears to be the case," Vexkoth confirmed. "The neural interface requires not just intelligence, but specific forms of creative and empathetic processing that humans excel at, but which our culture has trained us to suppress. Even our most gifted scientists could not overcome these barriers." Maya held her breath as Zephyr posed a question that meant everything to her. "And what the captured researchers? Have your superiors agreed to honor our arrangement?" Vexkotha's mandibles clicked in what Maya had learned to recognize as positive anticipation. "The High Command has concluded that the captured humans have no value as research subjects, since their unique mental capabilities cannot be duplicated or extracted. They have agreed to a prisoner exchange." The words hit Maya like a physical blow, but this time it was joy rather than pain that nearly knocked her off her feet. Captain Thornscale caught her as she swayed, his own eyes glowing with satisfaction at the news. However, Vexkoth continued, raising one clawed hand to forestall celebration. There are conditions. The exchange will take place gradually over a period of several months, and only after extensive psychological rehabilitation. Many of the prisoners have suffered significant trauma during their captivity. Understandable, Zephyr replied, though Maya could hear the controlled anger in his voice when he thought about what her people had endured. We are prepared to provide whatever medical and psychological support they require. Additionally, Vexkoth added, the Khazari Empire wishes to propose a broader arrangement. Our analysis of recent conflicts suggests that human capabilities in certain areas might be valuable to mutual security interests. We would like to discuss the possibility of cooperative research programs conducted under strict ethical guidelines and with full volunteer participation. The conference room fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. The Khazari Empire, one of the galaxy's most aggressive expansionist powers, was essentially proposing an alliance with humanity based on recognition of human intellectual and emotional capabilities. Maya watched Zephyr's expression carefully. She had learned to read Drachmary facial expressions over the past months, and she could see that he was as surprised by this development as everyone else in the room. What manner of cooperative research do you envision? One of the other mediators asked. Vexkoth's answer was unprecedented in Khazari diplomatic history. Programs focused on conflict resolution, prisoner rehabilitation, and cultural integration. Our initial analysis suggests that human approaches to these challenges are significantly more effective than traditional Khazari methods. Maya felt tears beginning to flow down her cheeks, but these were tears of a kind she hadn't experienced since before the attack on New Geneva. These were tears of hope, of possibility, of a future that might be brighter than anything she had dared to imagine. The first group of prisoners was released 3 weeks later, and Maya was waiting at the docking bay when their transport arrived. She had prepared herself for the possibility that her parents might not be among this initial group, but as the airlock doors opened, she saw two familiar figures step out into the bright lights of the station. Her father looked older than she remembered, his hair now touched with gray that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Her mother was thinner, with new lines around her eyes that spoke of stress and hardship. But they were alive, they were whole, and they were here. Maya ran toward them across the docking bay, her feet barely touching the ground in the station's low gravity. The reunion was everything she had dreamed of and more. Her parents' arms around her, their voices saying her name, the solid reality of their presence proving that some miracles do come true. My brave little girl, her mother whispered through her own tears. We heard about what you did, how you helped make this possible. We're so proud of you. I had help, Maya said, looking over her parents' shoulders to where Zephyr stood at a respectful distance, watching the reunion with obvious satisfaction. Zephyr saved me first, and then Star Whisper took care of me, and then all the other Drachmary helped me understand that sometimes the best way to fight is not to fight at all. Her father followed her gaze and straightened as he saw the massive alien warrior who had protected his daughter. For a moment, the two beings simply looked at each other, the human scientist and the Drachmary dragon, separated by vast differences in biology and culture, but united in their care for the small child between them. Then, her father did something that surprised everyone present. He walked over to Zephyr, looked up at the towering alien, and extended his hand in the universal human gesture of friendship and gratitude. Thank you, he said simply, for saving her, for protecting her, for keeping our family alive when we couldn't do it ourselves. Zephyr looked down at the offered hand, then carefully extended his own massive appendage to engulf the human's smaller one in a gentle grip. She saved herself, he replied. I merely provided transportation and occasional meals. Your daughter has a gift that goes far beyond what any of us expected. Over the following months, as more prisoners were released and the cooperative research programs began to take shape, Maya found herself in an unprecedented position. She had become something of a celebrity in certain circles, the human child who had convinced a Khazari officer to develop a conscience, who had helped negotiate peace between ancient enemies, who had proven that compassion could be more powerful than weapons. But Maya didn't think of herself as special. To her mind, she had simply done what anyone would do when faced with people who needed help. The fact that those people happened to include alien soldiers, dragon-like warriors, and living spaceships didn't change the fundamental equation. The galaxy was full of individuals who were afraid, lonely, or lost. Sometimes they expressed that fear through anger or violence, but underneath they were all just looking for the same things: safety, acceptance, and the knowledge that someone cared about their well-being. A year after the destruction of New Geneva, construction began on a new type of space station at the edge of Khazari territory. It was designed as a joint facility, incorporating human creativity, Drakmari engineering, and even some Khazari organizational principles. The station would serve as a research center, a diplomatic meeting point, and a symbol of what could be accomplished when different species chose cooperation over conflict. Maya stood once again on an observation deck, watching as the station's framework took shape in the void. Zephyr stood beside her, his massive form casting protective shadows while Star Whisper's consciousness hummed quietly through the ship's communication systems. "Do you think it will work?" Maya asked, her eyes fixed on the construction site. "Do you think people can really learn to trust each other instead of being afraid?" "I think," Zephyr replied thoughtfully, "that if one small human girl can teach a Khazari officer that honor is more important than orders, then anything is possible. Your species has shown us something we thought was myth, the power to change minds instead of simply defeating them." Star Whisper's melodic voice joined the conversation. "The galaxy is vast, young Maya, and there will always be those who choose conflict over understanding. But you have proven that there will also always be those willing to build bridges instead of walls. That may be the most important discovery of all." Maya smiled as she watched a group of Drakmari engineers working alongside human technicians and even a few Khazari specialists on one section of the station's hull. They moved with the careful coordination of people who had learned to trust each other despite their differences, and their cooperation was creating something beautiful. "I want to work on stations like this when I grow up," Maya announced. "Places where different people can come together and figure out how to understand each other better." "I have no doubt that you will," Zephyr assured her. "And when you do, the galaxy will be a better place for it." As the three of them watched the construction continue, Maya reflected on how much her life had changed since that terrible day when her world had been destroyed. She had lost her home, her friends, and nearly lost her family. But she had also gained something precious: the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, even when everything seems hopeless, there are always individuals willing to choose compassion over cruelty. Sometimes those individuals are fierce alien dragons who could crush you with a single claw, but choose instead to offer protection and comfort. Sometimes they are living spaceships who sing lullabies to frighten children. Sometimes they are enemy soldiers who discover that following orders isn't as important as following their consciences. And sometimes they're 8-year-old girls who refuse to let fear and hatred have the final word. Maya squeezed Zephyr's massive finger with her small hand and settled in to watch the birth of a new kind of future, one where the best of humanity could inspire the best in others, where tears could lead to understanding, and where a child's faith in the goodness of others could literally move mountains. In the end, that might be the most human thing of all: the stubborn, unreasonable, beautiful belief that tomorrow could always be better than today, and that every person, no matter how alien, how frightening, or how different, was worth trying to understand. The stars shone down on the growing station, on the mixed crews working together in harmony, and on a small human girl who had shown the galaxy that sometimes the gentlest voice carries the most power. And in that light, the future looked brighter than anyone had dared to hope.